You already know what this is about. You saw the title and something moved in your chest before you even clicked. Because you had one, or you wanted one so badly it kept you up at night. A Schwinn, chrome fenders that caught the sun, a banana seat you shared with your best friend. Handlebars so high your arms were above your shoulders and you did not care because you looked like the coolest thing on two wheels. That bicycle was the first real freedom you ever had. The first time you went further than your own street. The first time your mother could not see you anymore and you kept going anyway. Schwinn built that feeling for 4 generations out of a factory in Chicago, and then they lost it, all of it. The factory, the name. Now it is a sticker on a bike at Walmart made in China by people who never heard the word Schwinn in their lives. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. You remember the morning. You do not remember what year it was, but you remember the morning Christmas. You came down the stairs or around the corner or through the hallway, and there it was, leaning against the tree or standing in the middle of the living room with a ribbon on the handlebars, and your heart stopped, not slowed down. Stopped. Because you had asked for it. You had begged for it. You had circled it in the catalog so many times the page was wrinkled. And there it was, a Schwinn. The chrome was so clean it reflected the Christmas tree lights. The paint was a color you had never seen on anything before. Flamboyant lime, or radiant copper tone, or sky blue, or violet. And those were not just names somebody made up. Those were exactly what they looked like. You touched the seat and it was cold because the garage had been cold and your parents had wheeled it in before you woke up, and you did not ride it that morning because it was December and there was snow on the ground or frost on the sidewalk, but you sat on it, right there in the living room, both hands on the grips, feet barely reaching the pedals, and you already knew. You already knew that when the weather broke and the streets dried, and your mother finally said, okay, you could go outside, everything was going to be different because now you had a Schwinn. That first ride, you remember the first ride, the feel of the grips in your hands, the sound of the chain, the coaster brake when you pedaled backward and the rear wheel locked, you skidded on the pavement and left a black mark, and you looked back at that mark like you had just signed your name on the street. You rode to the end of the block. Then you rode to the next block. Then you turned the corner and you were somewhere you had never been on your own before, and you were not scared because you were on a Schwinn, and a kid on a Schwinn could go anywhere. Your mother told you to be home before the streetlights came on, and that was it. That was the only rule, and you obeyed it, mostly. But between the time you left your driveway and the time those lights flickered on, you lived an entire life. You rode to your friend's house and his bike was not a Schwinn, and he knew it and you knew it, and neither of you said anything, but you both knew. You rode to the school parking lot on Saturday when it was empty and did figure eights until you were dizzy. You rode to the creek where the older kids hung out, and you sat on your bike at the edge of the group, and nobody told you to leave because you were on a Schwinn, and that counted for something. You rode until your legs burned, and then you rode home and dropped the bike in the driveway, and your mother yelled at you to put it in the garage, and you did because that bike was worth more than anything else you owned, and you knew it. You parked it the same way every time, same spot in the garage, same angle. You wiped the seat with your shirt if it got wet. You checked the tires before every ride the way your father checked the oil in the car. That bike was not a possession. It was a partnership. It was the most important relationship in your life outside of your family and your dog, and you are not embarrassed to admit that because every kid who had a Schwinn feels the same way, and they are nodding right now. The banana seat, that is what everybody remembers first. long and slim with a chrome rail in the back they called a sissy bar. You could fit 2 kids on that seat if the kid in the back held on tight and you both pedaled, standing up on the hills. The handlebars went up high and swept back towards you, so you rode leaning back with your arms wide like you were steering a chopper down the highway, and that is exactly what it felt like when you were 11. The wheels were 20 inches and the wheelbase was short, and that meant one thing: wheelies. You could pull the front wheel off the ground and ride on the back tire for half a block if you got the balance right, and every kid in the neighborhood was trying to go further than every other kid, and somebody always fell and scraped their knee or their elbow, and nobody cried, because crying meant you had to go inside, and going inside meant you could not ride, and nothing was worse than not riding. In 1963, a man at Schwinn named A.L. Fritz saw what was happening in California. Kids were taking old bikes and turning them into something that looked like a motorcycle. Small wheels, long seats, high handlebars. Fritz went back to Chicago and built a prototype. He called it Project J38. The executives at Schwinn looked at it and laughed. They thought it was ridiculous. A children's bike that looked like a chopper. Nobody would buy that. Fritz convinced them to make a small run anyway. They priced it at $49.95. They could not make them fast enough. They ran out of 20-inch tires before they ran out of customers. By 1965, it was the best-selling bicycle in the history of the company. By 1968, 70% of every bicycle sold in America was a stingray or something trying to look like one. 70%. One bike, one design. The stingray did not just sell, it took over. And then came the crates, the orange crate, the apple crate, the lemon peeler, the pea picker, 5-speed stick shift on the top tube like a car, Springer fork in the front, chrome exhaust-style chain guard, metallic paint with racing stripes. For a kid who was too young to drive but old enough to want to, a K8 was as close as you could get to owning your own hot rod. That was Schwinn. They did not make bicycles. They made the thing you wanted more than anything else in the world. But the Stingray did not come from nowhere. It came from a family that had been building bicycles since before your grandparents were born. Ignaz Schwinn was 11 years old when his father died. His father was a master carpenter in a small town in Germany whose greatest creation was a pump organ that is still playable today, more than 150 years after he built it. Ignaz did not become a carpenter. He became a machinist. He became obsessed with bicycles at a time when bicycles were the most exciting technology in the world. He worked his way up to managing one of Germany's most respected bicycle factories, and then he decided that Germany was too small for what he wanted to do. In 1891, he packed up his wife Helen and their young son Frank and moved to Chicago. He was 31 years old. He spoke English poorly. He had no money. He had an idea. Chicago in 1891 was the fastest growing city in America and the center of the bicycle boom. 1 out of every 7 people in the city owned a bike. There were 300 bicycle manufacturers in the country, and 2/3 of them were within 150 miles of where Ignaz was standing. He worked at several factories, learned the American market, and in 1894 he met a German-born investor named Adolf Arnold, who had made his fortune in the meatpacking business. Arnold had money. Schwinn had vision. In 1895, they founded Arnold, Schwinn and Company on the corner of Lake and Peoria in Chicago. Their goal was simple: build a bicycle so good that it would survive in a market where everyone else was building them as cheaply as possible. It worked. By 1914, Schwinn was the largest bicycle manufacturer in America, with a quarter of the entire market. And then Ignaz passed the company to his son Frank W., who everyone called FW, and FW did something that would define the company for the next 50 years. He refused to make cheap bikes. He refused to sell through department stores. He built an authorized dealer network of independent bicycle shops across the country where a trained mechanic could assemble your Schwinn properly, adjust it to fit you, and repair it when something went wrong. You did not buy a Schwinn at Sears. You bought it at a shop on a side street in your town where the air smelled like rubber and chain grease and cardboard, and the floor was concrete, and there were bikes hanging from the ceiling and bikes leaning against the walls, and a man behind the counter who had been selling Schwinns since before you were born. He knew your name. He knew what size frame you needed by looking at you. He assembled your bike himself, and he adjusted the seat and the handlebars, and he showed you how the gears worked, and he told you to bring it back in 2 weeks so he could tighten everything after the cables stretched. And you did. And when something broke, you did not throw the bike away. You took it back to that shop, and he fixed it while you watched. And it cost $3 for a new brake pad or $5 for a new chain. And he did not charge you for the labor because you were one of his kids. That is what he called the children who came through his shop, his kids. He watched them grow up on Schwinns the way a teacher watches students move through grades. That was not just a sales strategy, that was a relationship. And it created a loyalty so deep that families rode Schwinns for 3 generations. Your grandfather rode one, your father rode one, you rode one. The dealer who sold them might have been the same man for all 3 of you. That was the world Schwinn built, and the world they destroyed. In the 1970s, the bicycle boom came back harder than ever. Adults wanted 10-speed bikes, and kids wanted BMX bikes. Mountain bikes were being invented by Californian adventurers who were using Schwinn frames and balloon tires to ride down hillsides in Marin County. The entire future of the bicycle industry was being built on top of Schwinn's own DNA, and Schwinn refused to participate. Frank Vai, the grandson of Ignaz, was running the company by then. When people told him mountain bikes were the future, he turned up his nose. Company executives poo-pooed the idea. That is a direct quote from the woman who wrote the book on Schwinn's collapse. The older executives dismissed the idea. They looked at what Specialized and Trek and Cannondale were doing, and they decided it was beneath them. They were Schwinn. They had been building bicycles since 1895. They did not need to follow trends started by hippies on dirt trails in California. Meanwhile, the Chicago factory was falling apart. It was 80 years old with outdated equipment and ancient inventory systems. In 1980, the workers voted to join the Auto Workers Union and then went on strike for 13 weeks. When it was over, only 65% of them came back. By 1983, the factory closed for good. 1,800 workers lost their jobs. Men who had spent their entire adult lives building Schwinns walked out of that building for the last time, carrying their tools in boxes. Some of them were second generation. Their fathers had worked there before them. Production moved to Taiwan. The company that had been built in Chicago by a German immigrant with a dream about building the best bicycle in the world was now having its bikes assembled overseas by people who had never set foot in the city where it all started. Edward Schwinn Jr., the great-grandson of Ignaz, was running things by then. He was young, and he was in over his head. He opened a factory in Mississippi that failed. He invested in a factory in Hungary that failed. The debt piled up, $75 million. The company was losing $1 million a month. In October of 1992, the company filed for bankruptcy. The journalist who covered it wrote that, to the very end, Ed could just not give up control. The company was sold out of bankruptcy for $43 million to an investment group that had no interest in bicycles and no connection to Chicago. Not a single Schwinn employee from the old company was kept on. The 1992 catalog was the last one the Schwinn family ever produced. Everything after that is a name on a box. Not a family, not a factory, not a legacy, just a brand. The name bounced from owner to owner after that. Zell bought it, then Questor, then Pacific Cycle, then Dorel, then Pawn Holdings, a Dutch conglomerate in 2021. Today, you can buy a Schwinn at Walmart for less than $200. It is made in China. It has nothing to do with the bicycle that Ignaz Schwinn imagined in a factory in Chicago in 1895. Nothing to do with the chrome fenders and the dealer network and the Paramount racers and the stingray that changed what it meant to be a kid in America. It is a sticker on a frame built by machines in a factory on the other side of the world. The original 6-story Schwinn factory at Lake and Peoria still stands in Chicago. It is vacant. Richard Schwinn, Ignaz's great-grandson, bought the small Paramount factory in Waterford, Wisconsin out of the bankruptcy. He started a company called Waterford Precision Cycles and built custom bicycles by hand for 30 years. He was the last Schwinn family member in the bicycle business. In June of 2023, he closed the factory and laid off his last 7 employees. When someone asked if he was grieving, he said the point of our business was never to keep the streak going. The point was to serve our customers. I kept that streak going for 30 years. I am done apologizing for it. 4 generations. A German immigrant who lost his father at 11 and crossed an ocean with nothing but a belief that he could build the best bicycle in the world. A son who turned that belief into an empire. A grandson who refused to see the world changing around him. And a great-grandson who could not hold on to what 3 generations had built. That is the story of Schwinn, not a business failure, a family story. The kind that starts with a man arriving in a new country with an idea and ends with his name in a store he would not recognize, on a product he would not claim. But that is not what you think about when you hear the word Schwinn. You think about the bike. The one under the tree, the one you rode until the street lights came on. The one that took you to your friend's house, to the creek, to the school parking lot on Saturday, and to the edge of the neighborhood where the road turned to dirt. You kept going because you were on a Schwinn, and a kid on a Schwinn did not stop at the edge. You think about the banana seat and the chrome and the handlebars that made you feel like you were flying, even when you were only going 8 miles an hour down a sidewalk in a neighborhood where nothing ever happened except everything that mattered. You think about the day you learned to ride with no hands. You lifted both arms into the air, the wind hit your chest, and for 3 seconds you were the freest person alive. That was Schwinn. That was what it gave you. Not transportation, not exercise, freedom. The first freedom you ever had that belonged entirely to you. If you had a Schwinn, tell me which one. If you got it for Christmas, tell me what color it was. If you can still feel those handlebars in your hands, that seat underneath you, and that wind in your face on the first warm day of the year when you finally got to ride, tell me about that. I read every single comment.